Hey guys, Hook here, and welcome back to another video with Final Fantasy Month, a series on my channel where I talk about nothing but Final Fantasy. Now, in this video, I'm going to be explaining my top 5 favorite picks from the Final Fantasy series. Now, this list is just going to be my personal picks, not just from the best of the best, just my personal picks. And also, before this video begins, I would like to say to you guys to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already and get notified, and also give this video a thumbs up and share it with your friends if you enjoy it. Now, without further ado, let's just get into the list of my top 5 personal favorite picks from the Final Fantasy series. Okay, starting at my number 5 spot is Final Fantasy II. Now, I know what you're gonna say is like, what? Why? Why did you pick Final Fantasy II as your number 5 spot? Like I said, this is just my personal favorite picks from the series, not just from the best of the best, just the personal favorites. Sorry, I've been moving my camera around. Anyway, I know the stat growth system is a little strange, but there's still a lot of stuff I like about Final Fantasy II, like the stat growth system, the characters and the songs, even the battle system. Not only from how the stat growth system works, it goes how not only you could level up your characters after you defeat an enemy like usual RPGs or JRPGs, is that you can also collect experience points to level up your weapons, which I find that a little strange, but it's okay, but just a little strange. And as for Firion, I do like his character in Dissidia, and same thing with its main villain, Emperor Mateus. And so, yeah. And also, there's a side story to Final Fantasy II, which is called Soul of Rebirth, which is basically a side story of Final Fantasy II, where it takes place the same time during the events at the end of the game, where it's basically both the same boss battle but the different setting. Anyways, moving on to my number 4 spot. My number 4 spot goes to Final Fantasy VIII. Now, for Final Fantasy VIII, I find that is pretty good. I don't have a lot of hatred towards it. I know it's a loved and hated Final Fantasy title, but I still like Final Fantasy VIII. It's for one reason, for a couple reasons actually. Its characters, its songs, and the battle system. Even the draw system, I believe it's called. The draw system is basically where you make your character steal magic from their enemies. So, and also Squall, the main character of the game, his main weapon is called the Gunblade, which is basically, it doesn't work like an actual gun, it's just a sword that looks like a gun. It does have a trigger which does work exactly like one, but doesn't fire, but if you get the timing just right by pressing R2 or R1, it basically deals 50 damage if your main character's at level 1, I think. So yeah, you gotta get the timing just right. And the draw system, I think, is pretty cool. And what I find surprising about Final Fantasy VIII is that there's basically 2 protagonists of the game, which is Squall Leonhart and Laguna. Which Laguna, he has his own character theme, which I find the beginning of it sounds kind of strange, but as it gets to the rest of the song, sounds pretty cool. Anyways, so yeah, Final Fantasy VIII, which is our loved and hated Final Fantasy title, I still like it. Anyways, moving on to my number 3 spot. My number 3 spot goes to Final Fantasy IV. Now, I know what you Final Fantasy IV fans have to say. You would just be like, no. No! Why? Why did you put it at number 3? I understand, but... I still love Final Fantasy IV. Fortunately, from Cecil's character, from... I do know the difference between Cecil in the actual Final Fantasy IV and to his character in Dissidia. And same thing with Golbez and Kain. Wait, actually, Kain's kind of his same character in Dissidia, like his actual character in Final Fantasy IV. Anyway, so Cecil, in the beginning of Final Fantasy IV, Cecil starts off as a Dark Knight, but as you progress the story of Final Fantasy IV, he becomes a Paladin, and then as he becomes a Paladin, he then battles himself, his Dark Knight self, actually, which basically is one of the best moments of the Final Fantasy series, along with a few other ones. And for Final Fantasy IV, there is surprisingly a family tree going on in that game. Same thing as it continues on with Final Fantasy IV The After Years, which I find Final Fantasy IV The After Years is an okay spin-off to Final Fantasy spin-offs. The only problem with Final Fantasy IV The After Years that I find is that it's the same thing over again, from the maps and then bosses, etc. But the family tree that I find is a very interesting thing with Final Fantasy IV. Because we do have other siblings in the Final Fantasy series, like from fathers and sons, mothers and daughters, siblings, cousins, you name it. And I thought Final Fantasy IV was the first Final Fantasy game to feature a Dragoon, which is Kain, but that's unfortunately Final Fantasy II, which Rickard from Final Fantasy II was never really mentioned because Final Fantasy II people don't like, I think. I know they don't like it, but So yeah, Final Fantasy IV is on my number 3 spot. I'm sorry that all you Final Fantasy IV fans have to say about that, but I still love Final Fantasy IV. Moving on to my number 2 spot, which goes to Final Fantasy XV, which was released back in 2016 on the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One, and I heard it's coming to PC till later on. But anyways, ever since I played Final Fantasy XV, I thought it was basically one of the best games of 2016, which is basically, before I played Final Fantasy XV, I thought Overwatch was the best. Even though it is, I still like it. But I put it as my second favorite game of 2016. And my number 1 favorite game of 2016 was Final Fantasy XV. Just because of its own characters like Noctis, Prompto, Gladiolus, and Ignis, which are basically your full party members of Final Fantasy XV. And plus, and also there's basically the camping system where it's similar to, if you remember the item in Final Fantasy that's called a tent, which is basically what you use to increase your full character's HP in your party, and same thing with their full magic points to recover, and then that automatically lets you save the game, which I find that is a kind of a lifesaver, actually, because we know save features are kind of a lifesaver when it comes to games. But the camping system in Final Fantasy XV works is that if you find somewhere where you find a campground, you would basically either camp or train. And as you camp, you level up your characters, even their skills, which from each character's skills is that Noctis' skill is fishing, Gladiolus' skill is survival, Ignis' skill is cooking, and Prompto's skill is taking pictures, because in Final Fantasy XV, not only it's basically what you think of an overworld game, it's basically Even some DLC in this game is actually pretty cool, like Episode Gladiolus, which kind of plays like a Devil May Cry game. Episode Prompto is very heartwarming, and the upcoming episode Ignis, which I feel like is going to be the most heartwarming than episode Prompto. Anyways, Final Fantasy 15 is basically one of my favorite games of 2016, and also one of my favorite Final Fantasy games. Now, before I get on to my number 1 pick, here are my 3 honorable mentions, or 4, or 5, or 6, I don't know. Anyways, my honorable mentions go to Final Fantasy 13 and its sequels. Sure, I know that Final Fantasy 13 didn't impress a lot of Final Fantasy fans, but it received positive reviews by most people, so it became our loved and hated Final Fantasy title, like Final Fantasy 8 and sometimes Final Fantasy 2, because I've seen almost every YouTube commenter just say that Final Fantasy 2 is just pretty good. Not perfect, but still good. I just still like Final Fantasy 2 anyway. Anyway, so Final Fantasy 13, including its sequels. I'm always stubborn, that's why I'm always talking so stuttery. Anyways, my other honorable mentions go to Final Fantasy X, Final Fantasy V, and Final Fantasy IX. They were close to my number 1. Final Fantasy 13 was actually kind of close being my number 2 spot along with 15. Now, my number 1 pick is going to be a little bit of a weird pick, which are basically 2 fan-favorite Final Fantasy games tied at my number 1, which I'm pretty sure you may know what they are, which goes to both Final Fantasy VI and Final Fantasy VII. Now, I know you find it as a kind of a weird pick, but they're just tied. Not only because they're fan-favorite Final Fantasy games, I still like them anyway because of how they do some setups. Like, Final Fantasy VI does have another family tree, well, kind of, because we do have a set of siblings, of twin siblings, kind of like Final Fantasy IV. And also, Terra and Kefka, I think they're very, very good characters. I know Kefka is kind of like one of the most praised Final Fantasy villains of all time. I know Sephiroth is kind of the most popular one, but Kefka is kind of the most praised. And actually, every time when I think of Kefka, every time when I look at him, it kind of reminds me of the Joker. Though, he's not really the Joker, but we know what the Joker and Kefka have in common is that they're both insane. But Joker, we know how he's insane, but even though Joker is kind of a complex character, kind of like Piccolo from Dragon Ball Z. But from Kefka, he's insane and he just wants to destroy the entire world, including humanity or life itself. Cause Kefka, he's like, he used to be, shoot, how should I describe Kefka? He used to be a top general, which then a science experiment went wrong and then gains powerful magical abilities, but also goes completely insane and wants to destroy the world. And he's done a lot of worse things than other Final Fantasy villains, like, he took over the world almost, and he almost destroyed the entire world with godlike powers. He destroyed the world by splitting the world in half, and he nearly destroyed the entire world by having godlike powers. And his final boss form I find is very interesting, because his final boss kind of describes his own character. Like, the first part describes his hatred towards the world and why he wants to destroy it. His second part kind of describes his insanity. His third form is basically kind of his belief in godhood. And his final form is basically a godlike Kefka. And heck, Final Fantasy VII had almost the same boss battle, which you first fight Genova at the end, and then you fight Bizarro Sephiroth which the boss battle theme that plays during Bizarro Sephiroth was Birth of the God, or yeah, I think it's Birth of the God. I think that's the name of the song. And then the final form of Sephiroth, called Safer Sephiroth, I find as a very cool one. Not only it plays his song at the end, which is One Winged Angel, Kefka's theme, his final boss theme, is Dancing Mad. And then Sephiroth's final form is his actual form, where Cloud finishes off Sephiroth with his final limit break called Omni Slash, which I find is a very cool one. Not in which one of the YouTubers that say that the part where Cloud uses his final limit break against Sephiroth says it's just eh, and I was like, pfft, says you. Because I like Final Fantasy VII, even some the spin-offs like Final Fantasy VII Advent Children, I love that movie. Dirge of Cerberus I heard wasn't really good, but it just got some 7s out of 10s, because I seen IGN's rating on Dirge of Cerberus, which they rated as 7.4 out of 10, I believe, or 7.3 out of 10. I'm not sure. But Crisis Core, very heartwarming one. And there's even a novel series called On the Way to a Smile, which is basically a novel series where it's episode. There's even an animated version of On the Way to a Smile, which is called Episode Denzel, which takes place where Denzel explains how did he become an orphan, and it also explains how did Cloud find him, or how is he found by Cloud, which I find very interesting. Anyways, so that does it for my top 5 favorite Final Fantasy games. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to give this video a thumbs up and share it with your friends. And also, subscribe to my channel and get notified every time a video drops by. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Alright, see ya!